Will the Rams only win 5 games this year? That's coming up on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily? Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. We are also available on YouTube. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and most importantly, drop your Rams takes down below. Drop some comments down below. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've covered LA sports for over a decade. You might know me for covering the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation, but I've been repping my Rams since they returned to LA. You know, I'm loyal to the soil, and that man to your right is Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him at Travis Rogers. Trav, of course, is the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710. He's entering his 8th year covering the team. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Now, Trav, we love the Rams, but you know who doesn't love the Rams? It's Vegas. The Rams are only favored in 5 games this season. You ready to get into it, my man?
Let's do it. Five seems interesting. I don't know if it's high, low, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, they're definitely not loving our Rams. And if you look at the Super Bowl odds, they're at plus 6,000 to win the Super Bowl by FanDuel. That's 24 out of 32 teams. Shawn McVay has coached 96 regular season games, and he's been the underdog just 24 times. But that is going to change this season because the Rams, they're underdogs across the board. And we're going to start with that week 1. I mean, you look at that week 1 matchup, the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, they're at plus 5.5 on the road. Shawn McVay, of course, he absolutely owns the Seahawks. You know, the NFC West circle of life. We know that Shawn McVay owns Pete Carroll and Shanahan kind of owns Shawn McVay unless it's in the playoffs. We know he owns him in the playoffs. But you look at this schedule early on, you got the Seahawks, you got the 49ers at home, you've got the rematch of Super Bowl 56, the Bengals on Monday Night Football on the road. And then the only game they're favored is week 4 against the Indianapolis Colts. And we don't know if it's going to be Richardson out of Florida as their quarterback. I know Jim Irsay will probably just make him the quarterback no matter what. Or is it going to be Gardner Minshew? But I think that's the game where you feel good about. But that one, the Rams are a -1 on the road. And then finally, week 5, a plus 4.5 points at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. One thing I will say about Philly, Travis, is we know the Super Bowl hangover is real. They're going to be on the road. That's when I think they could steal. But what's your outlook on these first 5 games, this gauntlet for the Rams early on?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point, Doug. And I think that this is something that I'm getting used to. I think it's something that Rams fans are going to get used to or try to get used to. And certainly, like you mentioned, I think this is new territory for Shawn McVay. This is not what they have been under McVay, that you really have to go back to his very first season here in Los Angeles to find a time where we weren't quite sure what the Rams were going to give them on a regular basis, that you didn't know if they were going to be good, if they were a little bit overinflated because they were playing a bad schedule, if maybe what Shawn McVay was doing offensively was something that people were going to figure out over time and be able to slow down. This is the first time where they've come into a season where they're expected to lose a bunch of games. And most of those games are at the front part of the schedule, like you've talked about, through those first 5. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do, because we'll talk about this. Like you mentioned, they're only a favorite 5 different times all season long. Most of those are in the back half of the schedule. And if you're really trying to find a couple of more, even those games are at the back half of the schedule. So looking at this first 5-game run, like you're talking about, this is going to be a lot. And you talk about the one game that they're favored in Indianapolis. Again, we got a long way to go to get there. There's injuries. There's all sorts of things that can pop up between now and then. But they're a 1-point favorite. That's basically a pick 'em. And they're a 1-point favorite going up against a team that is very likely to have one of the biggest projects in college football, or at this point NFL football, under center. This is not a team that you're favored over that's got, like Philadelphia, for instance. It's a really good team with a MVP level quarterback. This is a bad team with a project quarterback, and you're favored by 1. So I think that kind of gives you a real good idea where Vegas thinks this team is and where maybe a lot of NFL fans think this team is, where every time they go out there on a Sunday afternoon, they're going to be an underdog and they're going to be getting some points.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be underdogs, but I also think, too, I kind of like the fact that you're going to Seattle on the road, and I think that's going to get those juices flowing early. Yeah. Look, last season, it was the first time that McVay had ever been swept by Pete Carroll and the Seahawks in the regular season. He could conceivably be 10-3 versus them, including the postseason for his career. We know that Seahawks team, they're much improved. Yesterday, I was with you on that. Yeah, I'm not sold on Geno Smith. I think that could be a little fluky in year 2. I do like the weapons they added, but going on the road against that Seahawks team, I'll never forget when they won the division, all the Seahawks players, they wanted their hats, they wanted their T-shirts after that, and Jalen Ramsey was like, yeah, they can take their hats and T-shirts to Cabo and their cigars. So I know that anytime those two teams match up, it's definitely going to get it going. Then I look at, this is the one, I don't think they're going to win that game. I'm going to predict the loss, but I do think week 2, San Francisco 49ers at home. It's early enough in the season that we know that there's a really good chance that Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, they're going to be healthy. I like a chance of having a better run game this season with a healthy offensive line. And I like them to beat that 49ers team at home. I know that's a little bold, but a 4.5-point favorite at home. You look at the defensive line, of course, they had Armstead, they added Hargrave, they got Nick Bosa inside the outside. But I still think at home, McVay owes them one. McVay owes them one in the regular season at home. So I'm going with that as a win. Week 3, that's going to be difficult. I mean, just the secondary is so inexperienced. But, do you think they could defend Jamar Chase in that group?
I think that the week 3 in Cincinnati is going to be a tough putt. I think that something very strange would have to happen for them to be competitive in that game. The Bengals are a better football team than the Rams, at least on paper. We'll see what it looks like in week 3. I want to go back to what you're talking about with San Francisco. And this is Travis. Okay. This is just my personal experience watching this team play the 49ers over the last 7 years that I've been doing this. Every time I'm like, they got a chance in that game. They go out there and they get housed. Every time that I've thought that this, no, this is why, that it's early in the season, that they're healthy, or the 49ers don't have anything to play for. The Rams have been saved, that Shawn McVay, you're not going to do that to him X amount of times in a row. And it happens again. It's just one of those things that they really seem to have a bad matchup there. Thankfully, the 2 other teams in the division, they match up really well with. I like your optimism, Doug, in the San Francisco thing. I've been bit by that dog too many times. I'm not reaching out to pet it again. I'm just going to let that dog walk by and leave it alone.
Yeah, no, I'm with you for sure. I'm definitely a guy who looks at the Michelada hat full sometimes. But I mean, the way I look at it is if you can just go 1-2 and just stay afloat and find a way to get that win. Yes, my head tells me San Francisco is probably going to win that game. My heart tells me the Rams have a chance to win that game. I think it definitely comes down to the fact that will Brock Purdy be ready? Will they go with Trey Lance? And even if they don't, will this Rams offensive line be able to handle this 49ers defense? I mean, I love the fact that it's at home, and I just think that, look, we're going to learn early on if this team can contend, if they can just find a way to manage a 1-2 start. That's all I'm asking for. I'm asking for a 1-2 start. That doesn't ask for much. I think week 3 is going to be tough. Like you said, Bengals on the road. They're going to be up for that game. They have one of the most talented offenses in the game. They're a Super Bowl favorite, and they're a top 5 Super Bowl favorite team. For me, the Colts, that's a must win. Okay, that is a must win. It's a 10 a.m. Pacific start on the road. They're only a 1-point favorite in that one. I think, like I said, this Colts team, either Minshew or you got Richardson, you need to win that game, okay? And then if you can find a way to just go 2-5 in your first 5, I feel okay about that. But I think what we see every year is teams in the NFL, they win games that they have no business winning.
Very true.
Philadelphia at home, we know that on paper it looks like a mismatch, and there's no question about that. And we also know that offensively we got Brown, Smith. I mean, such a talented defensive line. There's going to be a lot of Eagles fans in the house. But if they do start with 2 wins in their first 2 and they go 2-2 into that matchup, then I think, okay, at this point, we have to see what we have. We're not thinking about tanking. We're not thinking about draft picks at that point. We're thinking about going 3-2 after 5, and that would be a surprise. So, yeah, that's that part of the schedule. And then you go through before the bye, week 6, Cardinals at home, you got their Rams are going to be a -4 in that one, so they're a favorite for that one. Of course, you're going to have no Kyler Murray. You're going to have a Cardinals team that's rebuilding. What's your thought on this kind of portion of the schedule?
Well, I want to go back to week 4 here, because I think that game against Indy is going to tell us a lot, Doug, not just about whether or not the Rams are going to be competitive, whether or not that they're going to have a certain outlook on the season. This will tell you what they've had in mind all along. Their performance in Indianapolis against a team that they're at least as good as, and maybe better than, I think will be a little window into what they're thinking is coming up in that portion of the schedule that you were just talking about, kind of that next 5 games along the way, because that's where it gets absolutely brutal. That's where you just have a series of games, a lot of them on the roads against former playoff teams. It's just that next chunk of 5 games is very grim when you look at it. This is not loaded up. Maybe week 6, against Arizona is the opportunity where you go and you say, okay, I got a chance to win that game. But really, other than that, there isn't anything until you get to week 11 potentially. And that's coming out of a bye. That's against Seattle, a team that you traditionally have matched up pretty well against. But from weeks 6 all the way through your bye in week 10, even into week 11, I'm kind of maybe bonusing one right there that right now they're underdogs. But it is a rough patch.
Definitely a rough stretch, but like you said, at that point in the season, we're going to know the direction that this team is heading in. I mean, you look at that stretch, I think what I look at is 2 road games against Dallas and the Packers in 2 consecutive weeks. The Steelers at home, to me, they're going to be a 1-point underdog. And look, I think the Steelers team is getting a lot of hype. I don't know if it's justified hype, but I think that's another one that they could steal. I think between the Eagles and the Steelers game at home, I think they're going to win one of those games. Now, I can't say with confidence which one that's going to be. I think Philly's going to be a tall task, no question about it. But I think at that point of the season, these teams with this kind of talent, these superstars, if the offense starts humming again, they're going to go for it. The Cowboys on the road, look, the Cowboys, all they know how to do when it comes to disappointing, that's just kind of what they do, right? I mean, at home, that game, they're going to be a 6-point underdog on the road against the Cowboys. And then week 9 in Green Bay, we talked about that. I really loved your story about how you have to try to keep beer cold.
You got to keep it warm enough so it doesn't freeze. My entire life has been, how do I keep that beer at about 40 degrees, 30, 38, 37, just barely above freezing? Out there, it's how do you prevent it from freezing? It still doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm never going back.
Yeah, exactly right. So if you look at part of the schedule, it's going to be tough. And then you got the bye. I like the Rams to be favored against bye. I feel confident about them against bye. But we're going to dive into the last half of the schedule coming up next here on Locked On Rams. But first, our friends over at FanDuel.
Yeah, let's talk about FanDuel right now. It is NBA playoff time, D-Mac, which means all of our Locked On Rams listeners should be making a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's right, $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. And this is all the numbers that Doug's pulling, all the numbers that we're talking about this season is all right off of FanDuel. There are great promotions every day. The app is safe and secure, and here's the best part, you can get paid instantly. So there's no better bet, no better place to bet all of your playoff action, NFL action, NHL action, Major League Baseball, PGA championships this weekend than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams, your first lesson each and every single day. And shout out to our everydayers who rock with us here. And also, we are available over on YouTube. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and also drop your Rams takes down below. We want all your thoughts on the Rams schedule, the fact the Rams are underdogs this year. Do you think they're going to surpass that 5-win total? Let us know down below. But Travis, let's dive into the second half of this schedule after the bye. And if you look at, you got a lot of division games. You got Seattle at home, Rams a +1.5. And you got week 12 at Arizona. The Rams are -2, so they're going to be a favorite on the road. We'll see if Kyler Murray will be back. Week 13, Cleveland at home. Yeah. Rams a +1 in that one. And that one, you got Deshaun Watson. You have a Cleveland offense trying to get some consistency, trying to score some points on the road. I think they'll be competitive in that one. This one, I don't feel great about. Baltimore on the road. Rams a +5. You got OBJ, you got Lamar Jackson. You're going against Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson in back-to-back weeks. What are your thoughts on that part of the schedule, Trav?
Yeah, I like that you kind of flagged the Cleveland game, Doug. That game obviously coming up in week 13. That's a game that I think that maybe you could throw into maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th game that I think the Rams could at least reasonably feel like they could be favored in. It's back in Los Angeles. And having done this for a while, having watched football for a long time, like I know most of our everydayers are, I'm going to buy the Cleveland Browns when they win a Super Bowl, when they make a repeated run to a deep AFC playoff run. I'm not a believer. I know that occasionally they are something other than dreadful, but for the vast majority of my life, they've been dreadful. I don't know if it's something in the air. I don't know if it's the second you put on that logoless helmet, you forget how to play football. I don't know what it is. I just know that they're never good. So coming on the road, it's the back half of the season. I think that this is where injuries can either really help your team or really hurt your team, depending on who you're approaching at any time. I think that you look at that Cleveland game as an opportunity right there. I think you look at that Seattle game coming out of the bye as an opportunity. Shawn McVay team's typically pretty good coming out of a bye. And this is the part of the schedule where you do start. I agree with you that Baltimore's probably a non-starter. I've seen them against the Ravens a few times. And when Lamar Jackson's in the house, that is a bad matchup for the Rams. That has not typically gone their way. But I don't like that. If you're looking for wins in that middle 5th or 3rd of a schedule, I think it's probably Seattle. I think it's probably Cleveland. And I know that this is going to play out over the course of the first 10 or 12 weeks of the season. What happens in the opening 9, 10, 11 games, I think is going to determine what happens over the last 6, 7, or 8 games, because like we've talked about, and as we'll go a little bit further into this, the last third of the schedule is the most gettable portion of their schedule. And there's no value in 6 or 7 wins. There is value in 3. There is value in 10, where you don't want to land is somewhere in that middle. And the last month and change of the season could really turn a Caleb Williams run into okay, are we going to get some, middle linebacker? Are we going to get an offensive lineman? Or are you not going to have to find your quarterback of the future at pick number 8, most likely?
Yeah, no, I think that is going to be one of the overarching storylines the entire season is if things get rough early on, what does this team do? But at the same token, too, I think also is going to be something where you look at the other teams. How's the NFC faring? Does it look like it's going to be wide open? Do they get enough wins early on to say, hey, let's go for it? I mean, we saw this is a Shawn McVay head coach that took over one of the worst teams in the NFL, and he goes 11-5 in his first season. He takes that Jeff Fisher offense, was averaging 16 points per game to over 30 points per game. So if anyone can do it, I think Shawn
just for the record, Doug, I don't remember any of those 16 points in the Jeff Fisher era. I'm sure that your numbers are right. I'm sure that you've done like you say, you like to bring your facts to the fight, which I respect, but I do not remember them scoring a single point, much less 16 of them a game.
Oh my! Sorry, did I say per game? I meant the entire time he was there, combined, all games combined. Sorry.
Sure, that sounds better. Yeah,
I'll make a correction there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you look at that stretch after Baltimore, and yeah, we'll talk about this stretch starting in Week 15. You got the Commanders at home, the Rams a 1-point favorite, and I think, of course, Shawn McVay, he's going to want to show out in this game. He's going to want to put on an offensive masterclass against the team where he was coaching. That's where he came up. That's where he made his bones with Washington. I think the Rams win that game. And then Week 16, the New Orleans Saints. So we talked about it last week. Only 2 primetime games. One of them is this Thursday night game against the Saints. What do you make of this matchup, Trav?
I think that Washington and New Orleans combo in weeks 15 and 16 is the spot where we might see a winning streak. I think that makes a lot of sense, that Washington feels like they're in a similar situation with the Rams. They're going through a change of ownership as well there. I don't know how much that'll impact the product on the field, but there's always stuff happening when you go through an ownership change. The Rams and the Commanders feel like they're it's one of the few times I think you look at the rosters, you feel like the Rams may actually have the better roster, at least on paper. And the Saints and the Rams have played each other. It feels a lot like the Packers that we talked about before, where they play seemingly every year. The Rams and the New Orleans Saints have played each other in the preseason. They've played each other in the regular season. We've seen them play each other in the postseason, that NFC Championship game a few years ago. It's always good. It's always an interesting game. And I think with Derek Carr being back in New Orleans or with New Orleans this year for the first time, they're obviously going through some sort of transition with what they're doing with their roster. It's on a short week in LA, which means that it's an incredibly short week for New Orleans. They have to take one of those days to get to LA. So they're basically working on a week where they get a practice or two. So I think that those two games for the Rams are really the spot where you can say maybe the Rams win a couple of games. I'll throw this out there too. When we're talking about where they're favored and maybe, give them that Seattle game, maybe give the second Seattle game after the bye, maybe give them that Cleveland game a little bit later in the season. You're looking about where the Rams feel like they have a real opportunity to win. It's weeks 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16. It's all late in the season. If you come into weeks 11, 12, 13, 15, and 16, and you're a 1 or a 2 or a 3-win team, be very careful. Do not jump out because, again, everybody wants Super Bowls. Everybody wants great players. Everybody wants to win all these games, but it doesn't happen every year. And if you have to get ready for what's coming later, that's not the part where you want to start spending money that's going to affect you in 2024.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be a decision that they're going to be grappling at that stage of the season. And yeah, I mean, that is the very interesting thing. I mean, if this was flip-flopped and you had these games to start the season, I think the outlook of the year could be very different. It would change the complexion of the season. But we talk about the New Orleans Saints game. One thing I will say is the last time they were on Thursday night, no one expected the Rams to win. And what happened? You had Baker Mayfield just going off the plane and finding a way to win a game. So
against Carr. Against Carr.
There you go. Against Derek Carr.
That Raiders absolutely dreadful. Yeah,
hey, exactly. I think, look, I mean, they're going to be much improved with Carr. The Saints have had a top 10 defense the last 3 years. That's going to be a difficult matchup, but I don't know. That's one I think I'm feeling pretty good about on a Thursday night, kind of recapture that Thursday night magic. And then week 17, the Rams travel to New York to take on the Giants, a 1 p.m. start in New York, a 10 a.m. start for the Rams. LA, a +3 underdog in that one. The Giants definitely are a much improved football team. They went 9-7-1 last year. You got Daniel Jones, I think, the kids would say he's kind of mid, right? I mean, it's pretty much, he's kind of right middle of the pack, maybe at best. So, yeah. And then, of course, the Niners game in week 18, Travis, hey, at that point, the Rams, of course, they're a +6 in that one. They're going to be underdogs. But will San Francisco be resting their starters for playoff positioning? Will the Rams need a win or two to sneak into the playoffs at that point? So that's going to be very interesting, too. Where do you think the Rams will look at that point of the season?
I think that it's almost impossible to project that far because of injuries, because of, like you said, Doug, who knows who's playing for what at that point. San Francisco may be in a dogfight for a playoff position. They may be running away with the NFC West. They may be doing what the Rams did a year ago, where you come in with these incredibly high expectations and you face plant all of a sudden. It's like, all right, let's just get this thing over with and let's get ready to run it back the year after that. So the Niners, always a tough matchup. The Giants, who knows with them, right? The Giants are always kind of a weird team. I know last year they kind of came out of nowhere. Brian Daboll obviously has done a really good job with them. They've got a bunch of primetime games for the first time in a long time. But I agree with you on the midness of Danny Dimes. I think that he's okay. I don't think he's bad, but I'm also not up late at night worrying about how you're going to slow him down. So I think there might be, if we're looking for sneaky opportunities, I think the Giants may be one.
Yeah, for sure. He's like Danny Nichols, right? He's like a 5 out of 10, not a dime. But yeah, we'll see about that game. And yeah, I mean, at that stage of the season, if the Rams' fate is in a week 18 matchup against San Francisco on the road, maybe the rivalry will come into play and San Francisco will want to end their season. So I think that could also be in play as well. But in the final segment, we're going to talk about, can the Rams be a surprise team? Can they win more than 5 games in 2023? What would have to break right for that to happen? That's coming up on our final segment here on Locked On Rams. All right, in our final segment here on Locked On Rams, can the Rams be a contender? Can they find a way to be a sneaky contender and compete in the NFC West? Well, Travis, you look at this team, you look at this schedule, the way it's lined up, it doesn't look very promising, but look, you also have to remind yourself that if this team can stay healthy, if the offensive line can stay healthy, if Matthew Stafford can stay upright, if you can develop a running game and you get some pieces on defense that hit with some of these young guys, maybe this team can compete. But what are your thoughts? What's your outlook of this team going for it in 2023?
I think you made a great point in the last segment, Doug, which is, if this schedule, if you played it in reverse order, if you started in week 18 and played it to week 1, I think the Rams have a totally different approach to what they're doing. I think that there would be an opportunity to go through the first, 8-9 weeks of the season and have 5 wins. Maybe if things break really, the way that you're hoping to, maybe you're 6-3 through those first 8 or 9 games. But that's not how they're going to play it. They're going to play it the other way. And I really do think through those first 10 weeks of the season, 9 weeks, 10 weeks is their bye. I really only see maybe 1 or 2 wins. And if you're 1-8, if you're 2-7, look, I would love to be wrong about this. I would love to be sitting there in the middle of the season talking about that Eagles game, talking about the Cowboys game, and saying, wow, look at this Rams team at 4-1. Who would have saw this coming? And look how good Matthew Stafford looks. And Cooper Kupp looks like he's 25 years old all over. I would love to be saying that. I just don't think that I am. I don't think that they think that they're going to be. I think, again, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. And what they've done is nothing. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. They've just been very deliberate in how they go about building this team. Look, if they catch the right guy at the right time, if they get some breaks with injuries, if some other teams are unlucky with injuries, maybe get to the halfway point and you're 5-4. And now all of a sudden the back half of the schedule looks very promising and you can get to that 10 wins and go to the playoffs. And then, like we all know, anything can happen at that point. But a lot of very unforeseen, unlikely things would have to break their way for the Rams to be a 9-10 win team and be competing for a playoff spot. I think that 4, 5, 6 is the most likely. I think that the 2, 3, 4 is probably in the back of everybody's mind in the event that the first 9 games go a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's when you look at the way the schedule is, when you look at, like we said early on, that it's so difficult. It's a gauntlet to start the year. But hey, you just have to find a way to look. You're not going to win all the games you're favored in, but if you can win 4 or 5 of those games, if you can even win all 5 and run the table in those games, you're going to feel really good about that. You win 2 surprise games, and then you win 2 of those toss-up games. I think the toss-up games are going to be the big key. Giants on the road, 10 a.m. starts, stuff like that's pretty difficult. And yes, when you consider the fact that there's going to be so many rookies that will be having a significant role on this team, when you consider the lack of experience, when you consider the lack of talent on the defensive side of the ball, no one is going to be surprised if they do go 5-12 this season. But also, I think if you look at this offense, you can't doubt Shawn McVay, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp. I think Cam Akers in a contract season, he went off to finish the year 3 100-yard games. They reestablished the run. I think there is a universe where if everything breaks right and you win some of these toss-up games, you win some of these games where you're not favored, you take care of the games that you are favored in, maybe they do go 9-8, maybe they do go 10-7, and they make a run at the playoffs. Because this NFC is not a strong NFC. This division, yes, you have the 49ers, but they have some question marks as well. So it could happen,
right? It does not feel like you have to have 11 wins in that conference to get in. If you're 9-7, or 9-8, I guess now with 17 games, I'm still operating under the old number with 16. But if you're 9-8, I think that gets you in. And there's a universe where 8-9 gets you in. I think that those are all possibilities, and getting to 8 wins doesn't seem impossible. I think it's a challenge, but again, we'll see what those first 9 games look like. If you get 3 or 4 wins, I think they get to 8 or 9. If you're only at 1 or 2, then I think we know what's coming after that.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, look, I mean, if you go 9-7, is that final game? Who knows? Maybe you go 10-7 and you beat the Niners in that game they give you. So I'm hoping this team can find a way to compete this year. And look, this is the bottom line with this team, is that if they're going to win games, it's going to be in entertaining fashion. It's going to be because the offense has to explode. It's going to be because the offensive line has improved and stayed healthy. So we'll see this year if it can happen. Look, a lot has to break right, but still, look, this is a very competitive organization. And I think, too, the silver lining in all of this is if they do play poorly, really, no one's going to fault them. No one's going to say, oh, the Rams are this, the Rams are that. They're just going to say, hey, they were playing things smart. They're developing rookies and young players, and they're playing for 2024 when they are going to have all that cap space back on the table. So that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. For myself, Doug McCain, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And that man to your right, Mr. Travis Rogers, the Rams pre, half, and post-game show for ESPN's flagship Rams network, ESPN 710 LA. And also drop your comments down below in the comment section. How many games do you think the Rams will win in 2023? Do you think it will be more than 5? Do you think they can be a surprise team? Let us know down below. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams house?